What would happen if you discovered that the Bible is incomplete and that it is missing a fundamental book? For centuries, the Book of Jasher has been deliberately suppressed from official canonical history. Its pages contain forbidden tales about the giants that walked upon the ancient earth. The truth about the Nephilim and the world before the flood has been hidden in plain sight. Today we unearth those forgotten passages to reveal the most amazing details of our past. What you are about to hear will recontextualize everything you thought you knew about the sacred scriptures. Mainstream narratives often skip over texts like Jasher for obscure and mysterious reasons. There is a lost history that runs parallel to the sacred texts we venerate today. The Book of Jasher is a contemporary text to the Bible, referenced, but rarely read by the faithful. The question of censorship inevitably arises when we analyze why it was excluded from the final canon, why religious authorities decided that this knowledge was dangerous for the masses. Jasher offers a detailed and unique account of the origin of the Nephilim, which goes beyond Genesis. The text describes how the sons of God descended to corrupt the pure lineage of humanity. It was not just a spiritual union, but a biological intervention that created monstrosities on earth. The dominion of the giants before the flood was much more extensive and tyrannical than we imagine. Jasher relates how these hybrid beings established a reign of absolute terror over men. Their influence was not only physical, but they possessed forbidden and advanced technological knowledge. The spiritual and technological deviation of the giants was the true cause of the global divine judgment. They taught men the secrets of war, sorcery, and the manipulation of nature. However, official history prefers to keep these details in the shadow of myth and legend. Reading Jasher, we discover that genetic corruption was the main goal of the fallen angels. The flood was not just a punishment for moral sin, but a necessary purge of a contaminated DNA. But here arises an even greater mystery that challenges the conventional chronology that we have all accepted. The Book of Jasher narrates the surprising survival of certain lineages of giants after the Great Flood. This contradicts the popular belief that all the Nephilim perished under the waters of judgment. Biblical intersections with figures like Nimrod take on a new meaning in the light of this text. Nimrod was not just a rebel king, but a man who sought to recover the lost power of the ancients. Jasher details the genealogies of power that connect the giants with the first post-Diluvian civilizations. The figure of Og of Bashan is presented with details that the canonical Bible simply omits completely. It is said that Og survived by clinging to the ark, a detail that changes our understanding of mercy. These accounts suggest that the seed of the serpent found a way to persist through the cataclysm. The influence of the giants continued to shape human history long after the waters receded. Goliath was not an isolated genetic anomaly, but the descendant of a royal lineage of hybrid warriors. The text of Jasher allows us to trace this bloodline and its impact on the wars of Israel. The megalithic structures that baffle archaeologists find their explanation in these pages. Only beings with supernatural strength and lost technology could have moved such stone blocks. Jasher sheds light on archaeological findings that modern science prefers to ignore or misclassify. The conventional historical narrative stumbles when we introduce the data that this book preserves. We are facing a direct challenge to the established view of biblical history and the human past. It is necessary to reevaluate everything we have been taught about the origins of civilization and religion. Modern scholars have begun to look with different eyes at this text that was despised for so long. The debate over its authenticity is intense, but the coherence of its accounts is impossible to ignore. Jasher fills the narrative gaps that Genesis leaves open, offering a complete and terrifying picture. It speaks to us of a time when the distinction between the human and the divine was dangerously blurred. The giants were not only large in stature, but they possessed superior intellects and deep malice. They stole the secrets of heaven to enslave the earth and become gods among mortals. The suppression of this book could be the greatest theological cover-up of the last 2,000 years. By hiding Jasher, the true nature of the spiritual battle we wage was also hidden. We do not fight only against flesh and blood, but against principalities that have a very ancient origin. The text describes genetic abominations, crosses between species that deeply offended the Creator. Nature itself was corrupted, altering the natural order of the animals and plants of the earth. Jasher mentions how the giants devoured everything that man produced with his hard work. When resources became scarce, these beings turned against humans to devour their flesh. The terror of living under the shadow of the Nephilim is something that the canonical scriptures barely hint at. But Jasher describes it with a rawness that makes us understand the urgency of the universal flood. God's decision to wipe out all flesh becomes understandable in the face of such a level of monstrosity. However, the mystery persists as to how the knowledge of the Watchers survived the cataclysm. Jasher suggests that certain records and technologies were preserved in pillars of stone and brick. This would explain the sudden resurgence of advanced civilizations in Sumeria and Egypt after the flood. The wisdom of the fallen gods did not disappear. It simply changed hands and hid in mysteries. The mystery schools of antiquity could be the guardians of this forbidden knowledge. The Book of Jasher acts as a master key that unlocks the understanding of these enigmas. It shows us that human history is a battlefield between pure lineages and corrupt lineages. The obsession of ancient royalty with blood purity takes on a sinister and literal meaning. They sought to preserve the characteristics of the gods who ruled before the Great Flood. Jasher mentions names and places that modern archaeology is barely beginning to rediscover today. Each discovery that validates the text is a blow to the academic structure that denies the supernatural. The existence of giants is the elephant in the room that secular history refuses to see. But ancient texts read together form a unanimous chorus that shouts the forgotten truth. The Bible mentions the Book of Jasher in Joshua and in Samuel, validating its historical and real importance. How can a book cited by the prophets be considered irrelevant or false by us today? This contradiction is the gateway to a world of uncomfortable questions for modern theology. By recovering Jasher, we recover a piece of the puzzle that makes sense of the chaos of the ancient world. We understand why God ordered the total destruction of certain tribes in the land of Canaan. It was not divine cruelty, but a sanitary measure to stop the spread of Nephilim blood. Jasher confirms that the Canaanite tribes were infested by the genetics of the remnant giants. The War of Joshua was a war against hybrids to ensure the survival of the future Messiah. Without this perspective, the Old Testament seems like a succession of bloody wars without justification. With Jasher, it becomes a chronicle of the defense of humanity against a biological invasion. The text also explores the psychology of these beings, their arrogance and their contempt for human life. They believe themselves immortal, masters of destiny, until the waters of the abyss broke over them. But evil has a way of resurfacing, and Jasher warns us about the lengthening shadows. The story of the Tower of Babel is enriched by the details that this lost book provides us. Nimrod tried to storm heaven not with arrows, but with technology learned from the ancestors. The confusion of tongues was a necessary check to stop a second collapse of humanity. Jasher invites us to look at ancient ruins, not as tombs, but as monuments of a lost power. The stones of Baalbek and the pyramids are silent witnesses to the truth of these accounts. The engineering impossible for primitive man was child's play for the sons of the angels. By ignoring Jasher, we have remained blind to the evidence that is scattered all over the planet. The narrative of the giants is not a fable for children, but the censored history of the earth. In every culture of the world, similar legends exist, but Jasher unifies them into a coherent account. From the Greek Titans to the Indian Rakshasas, all point to the same historical reality. The Book of Jasher is the common thread that unites global mythology with pure biblical revelation. It forces us to question what other texts have been hidden in the secret vaults of the Vatican. How much of our history has been edited to keep us in a comfortable and controlled ignorance? Modern academic curiosity is breaking the seals that kept this book closed for centuries. Today we have access to translations that our ancestors could not read even in secret. This is the era of revelation, where what is hidden is coming to light to be examined by all. But with knowledge comes the responsibility to discern the truth among so many lies. Jasher is not infallible, but it is an indispensable window to see the landscape of the ancient world. It shows us the biblical patriarchs interacting with a much more complex and dangerous reality. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob lived in a world where giants were still a tangible and real threat. The wars of the kings in Genesis 14 are better understood as conflicts between Nephilim lords. The bravery of the patriarchs takes on a new dimension when we understand whom they were facing. They were not simple shepherds, but spiritual and physical warriors in a hostile and occupied territory. The Book of Jasher dignifies the figure of the ancient Hebrews by showing the magnitude of their enemies. It also alerts us to the possibility that these dark days could be repeated in the future, as it was in the days of Noah. So shall the coming of the Son of Man be, warned the biblical prophecy. Understanding the days of Noah through Jasher is vital to understanding the times we live in today. Genetic manipulation and hybridization are once again central themes in our current science. We are opening the same doors that the ancients opened for their own total destruction. The Book of Jasher functions as a dark mirror where we can see our own destiny reflected. The warnings of the past resonate with a terrifying force in the modern technological context. The fascination with the transhuman is a direct echo of the Nephilim ambition to be gods. By studying Jasher, we not only study history, Dora, but we analyze the human condition and its limits. The suppression of the text has lasted too long, but the internet has democratized access to the forbidden. Now you have the power to read, compare, and draw your own conclusions about the hidden truth. Do not depend on the official interpretation that seeks to maintain the status quo of collective ignorance. The giants left physical footprints that cannot be erased, bones and stones that cry out for justice. Jasher is the written testimony that accompanies the physical evidence found in museums. Although many museums hide giant skeletons in their basements, far from the general public, the conspiracy of silence is vast and spans both religious and scientific institutions. Breaking that silence requires courage and an open mind willing to accept the impossible. The Book of Jasher is a tool for truth seekers who do not settle for little. It challenges us to expand our understanding of God, of the universe, and of man's place in it. It reveals that the earth has been the stage for cosmic dramas that exceed our limited imagination. Angels, demons, and giants are not metaphors, they are real actors in our history. Reality is much stranger and more fascinating than any fiction Hollywood can produce. In the end, Jasher restores our sense of wonder at the complexity of divine creation. It reminds us that there are mysteries still waiting to be solved under the desert sands. Every verse of this forgotten book is a missing piece in the great mosaic of Revelation. The resistance to accepting these texts comes from the fear of having to rewrite history books. But the truth does not fear scrutiny. Only lies need to be protected by censorship, if the Bible is the Word of God. Jasher is the historical context that helps us interpret it. To ignore it is to decide to watch the movie of history with one eye closed and the other half covered. The invitation is to explore, to question, and not to accept dogmas that do not stand the test of data. The giants were here. They ruled, they fell, and they left a legacy that still affects us today. Their blood may have disappeared, but their cultural and spiritual influence persists in the world. Recognizing their existence is the first step to freeing ourselves from the chains of false history. The Book of Jasher has returned from oblivion to challenge a generation looking for deep answers. It is no coincidence that this knowledge is resurfacing precisely at this moment in history. There is a divine purpose in the timing of the revelation of these ancient and mysterious texts. What we do with this information will determine our understanding of the future ahead. History is cyclical, and the echoes of the past are sounding louder and louder in our present. Listening to those echoes is vital to avoid making the same mistakes that led to the Great Flood. Intellectual pride is the #1 enemy of discovering real historical truth. We must approach Jasher with humility, but with a sharp, critical, and analytical spirit. What we find in its pages can be disturbing, but the truth is rarely comfortable. It is an invitation to look beyond the veil into the depths of an ancient abyss. There, in the darkness of the remote past, we find the keys to understanding our identity. We are survivors of a cosmic war that began long before we were born into this world. The Book of Jasher is the battle record of that ancestral conflict for the dominion of the earth. Closing this analysis, it is clear that official history is only the tip of the visible iceberg. Below the surface lies a mountain of suppressed truths waiting to be discovered by you. The reality of the giants and the book that describes them can no longer be ignored by anyone. We have opened the door to a mystery that will forever transform your vision of antiquity. Subscribe now if you want to keep revealing the forbidden secrets that history has tried to erase. Oh.